Globalization, International Economics and Standard of Living, Unit 1. At the end of this session, you'll be able to answer, what is globalization? Why nations go global? What is international economics? How is globalization and international economics connected? What is international trade theory? What is international monetary economics? How is economic growth related to standard of living? Globalization, meaning and importance. Let's start with this activity. Look at anything near you, your shirt, laptop, phone etc. and annotate on this slide where it is made. What is globalization? When countries reach out to other countries for certain goods or services, which are either very expensive in the home nation, or there are not enough resources to produce them, it is said that a nation is going global. Globalization basically is integration of different economies in the world. There are three ways by which nations can do so. First is free movement of goods and services, which means that products travel the world without any taxes, import or export duties. Second is financial flow, which is when company in one country agrees to invest in some other country. It means that countries liberalize their import protocols and welcome foreign investment into sectors that are the mainstays of its economy. Countries become magnets for attracting global capital by opening up their economies to multinational corporations. And last is movement of ideas and people, which means that countries liberalize their visa rules and procedures so as to permit the free flow of people from country to country, for example IT sector or call centers. Most companies have their call centers in Asia. Why? Because the labor there is very cheap. The pay at which one employee would work here in Canada or US, companies can employ 3 people at the same cost. So, countries find global integration very cost-effective. Moreover, globalization results in freeing up the unproductive sectors to investment and the productive sectors to export-related activities, resulting in a win-win situation for the economies of the world. There is a formal definition of globalization by World Health Organization which focuses on interconnection and interdependence of different countries. If a country is dependent on exports, certainly any political or economical change in the exporting country would impact both the nations. As per this definition, there are 2 main elements of globalization: international trade and international finance. With advancement of technology and transportation, it becomes easier for countries to work with other nations in the world. Globalization is actually based on the principle of comparative advantage, which states that a country which enjoys advantage at producing a certain product will gain from trade of that product. Conversely, the latter country can then export the goods that it produces in an efficient manner to the former country which might be deficient in the same. The underlying assumption here is that not all countries are good at producing all sorts of goods and hence they benefit by trading with each other. The examples here can be China, which has advantage at manufacturing, India has advantage at providing services, most of the clothing in Canada and US is imported from Bangladesh. Based on capitalism and powered by advances in telecommunications, transportation and finance, globalization has boosted competitiveness, productivity, innovation, and standards of living. Let's watch this video which will clarify the concept of globalization more. There are some of the examples of globalization. Economic globalization is the development of trade systems within transnational actors such as corporations or NGOs. Financial globalization can be linked with the rise of a global financial system with international financial exchanges and monetary exchanges. Stock markets, for instance, are a great example of the financially connected global world. Cultural globalization refers to the interpenetration of cultures which, as a consequence, means nations adopt principles, beliefs, and costumes of other nations, losing their unique culture to a unique, globalized supraculture. Political globalization, the development and growing influence of international organizations such as the UN or WHO, means governmental action takes place at an international level. Sociological globalization means information moves almost in real time, together with the interconnection and interdependence of events and their consequences. People move all the time too, mixing and integrating different societies. Technological globalization is the phenomenon by which millions of people are interconnected via platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Skype or YouTube. Geographic globalization is the new organization and hierarchy of different regions of the world that is constantly changing. Moreover, with transportation and flying made so easy and affordable, it is possible to travel the world without barely any restrictions. Ecological globalization accounts for the idea of considering planet Earth as a single global entity, a common good all societies should protect since the weather affects everyone and we are all protected by the same atmosphere. To this regard, it is often said that the poorest countries that have been polluting the least will suffer the most from climate change. To understand why globalization is important for countries, how it impacts them, let's have a look at Indian and Chinese economies. In late 1980s, China started opening up of its economy and adopted reforms in two stages. First, focused on fetching foreign investment and second, to promote privatization of its different sectors. Reforms proved successful for China and it became second largest in GDP after US and largest exporter and second largest importer in world trade. As we can see from the graph, which shows China's annual GDP growth from 1991 to 2020, that its GDP rose significantly in 1992 after reforms were introduced which kept steady till 2019. We can also see the impact of COVID-19 on their economy. In 2020, it turned negative. Here is the example of India, which opened up its economy in 1991 by bringing LPG concept, which is liberalization, privatization and globalization. As a result, India became 10th largest in GDP and 7th largest in services trade. Globalization benefited India's service sector and make it an attraction for foreign investment. The graph shows India's annual GDP growth from 1996 to 2020 and we can see that it had significant impact of India's economic growth, which has variations until 2020. Globalization has benefits that cover many different areas. It developed economies all over the world and increased cultural exchanges. It also allowed financial exchanges between companies, changing the paradigm of work. Many people are nowadays citizens of the world. The origin of goods became secondary and geographic distance is no longer a barrier for many services to happen. Let's dig deeper. The most visible impacts of globalization are definitely the ones affecting the economic world. Globalization has led to a sharp increase in trade and economic exchanges, and also to a multiplication of financial exchanges. In the 1970s world economies opened up and the development of free trade policies accelerated the globalization phenomenon. This significantly contributed to increasing the interactions between different regions of the world in form of FDI and thus increased GDP. The integration of the global economy has mainly been due to the rapid spread of IT and communications that enabled countries like India and China to circumvent the aspects that were holding them back. In other words, the increasing interconnectedness was driven by real-time communication between the West and the East, which enabled these countries to reach out to wider markets and audiences in the Western countries. The classic example in this regard is India, that has managed to tap into the booming market for IT and process outsourcing. The integration of economies around the world created competition among countries. So, to gain more from globalization, countries started taking comparative advantage of the products which were easy to manufacture and thus export. As a result, the importing countries tend to have more options and cost advantage due to competition. When we discuss globalization, we often take into account the fact that both countries that are partners in trade benefit from the exchange. What this means is that a country A that specializes in a particular good or service can trade with country B that specializes in another good or service. In this way, both countries stand to gain as they import the goods that are cheaper to make in the other country. Studies have shown that globalization has succeeded in lifting millions of people out of poverty and has ensured that they live a decent life. Also, the economic and financial exchanges lead to an increase in human exchanges such as migration, expatriation or traveling. These human exchanges have contributed to the development of cultural exchanges. And at last, globalization has helped nations by leveling their employment statistics. Now, we can clearly figure out that international trade and international finance are two major drivers of globalization. This will be the foundation of our next topic, which is international economics. Time for quiz.